Hi everyone, thanks for joining me. Now, with the spooky season upon us, I thought it was the ideal time to run down my top 10 favourite horror games. Now, horror is my absolute favourite genre of film, it's my favourite genre of video game, so with Halloween just around the corner, there's no better time. Now, I'm not saying this is the absolute definitive list of the best horror games ever. These are just my personal favourite horror games that I've played over my 30-something years of gaming. And there are still some horror games that I've not got around to playing yet. There's games like D on the Saturn, Deep Fear on the Saturn, there's D2 on the Dreamcast, although I think to be able to afford to play Deep Fear and D2 I'm probably going to have to sell a kidney, or maybe even both of them, so I think the chances of me playing those at the minute are slim to none. But there's also other games like Cold Fear on the Xbox that I really want to play, so hopefully I'll get to play those in the future, and maybe in the future I'll do a revised list. But for the time being, these are my top 10 favourite horror games. But let me know what your top horror video games are. Pop them in the comments below or do a video response, I'd love to hear what they are. And if you have any recommendations of any hidden gems or anything like that, let me know. Right, before we get to the top 10, there's just some honourable mentions I need to give to some games that didn't quite make the list. Now, these are still games that are up there with some of my favourites. I think they're absolutely brilliant, but for one reason or other, they didn't just quite make the list. And the first game on the honourable mentions list is PT. Now, the reason PT isn't on the list is because it's not strictly a game, it was more of a demo. PT, playable teaser. Although I do think PT should actually stand for purely terrifying or poo trousers, because this game is absolutely terrifying. It is like playing a nightmare. From start to finish, it's just one of the most terrifying gaming experiences I've ever encountered. It is absolutely relentless in creating an atmosphere of dread and fear as you make your way down a seemingly innocent L-shaped corridor. And if PT was anything to go by, I have no doubt that Silent Hills that we would have got from Kojima would have been absolutely up there as one of the scariest games ever. But unfortunately, it wasn't meant to be. Number 2 on my honourable mentions list is Little Nightmares 2. Now, this is actually a prequel to Little Nightmares 1, and you play as Mono, a young boy trapped in this nightmarish world that's been distorted by this evil television transmission, and you have to escape. It's absolutely fantastic. I love the atmosphere, I love the eerie, bleak graphical style, and the grotesquely fantastic enemies. There's some absolutely brilliant set pieces which will get your heart pumping and the adrenaline flowing. If you played the first Little Nightmares, you've absolutely got to play this. It's brilliant. Number 3 on the honourable mentions list goes to Condemned Criminal Origins on the Xbox 360. Now, I got this when I first got my Xbox, and the game just reminded me of Seven, the film. I mean, the intro sequence is pretty much exactly the same as Seven, the film, but it's so dark and gritty, and it really sort of creates this atmosphere of sort of fear as you play it. You play as a forensic CSI type agent who basically gets framed for killing his 2 colleagues, and he has to clear his name. The game incorporates such an effective use of sound as you can hear people and things moving all around you, and it really does create this feeling of tension. Enemies come charging and screaming towards you and show absolutely no mercy. It's a game that keeps you on your toes the whole time that you're playing it. And the final game on my honourable mentions list goes to Eternal Darkness: Sanity's Requiem on the GameCube. Now, at the time, this was a Lovecraftian survival horror game that showed the world that the GameCube wasn't just a console for kids. It's very dark and it's very moody. It takes place over numerous time periods, and you control different characters and follow their story and their dealings with a flesh-bound book called The Tome of Eternal Darkness. It uses a sanity meter that, when depleted, has the game mess with your head, and it'll say things like your memory card's been wiped, or it'll look like the volume's being turned down on your TV, or it'll go into a fake BIOS screen. All these things just mess with your head and really do create a sense of fear and confusion and panic while you're playing. I must admit, I've not seen a similar game since this release, which is a shame, because this sanity meter, which is apparently patented by Nintendo, is such an effective mechanic to use. I'd love to see it used in modern games. Okay, so on to the top 10. Now, coming in at number 10 is Tormented Souls. Now this is a recent release, it was only released a few months ago and I absolutely had no idea about it. It completely flew under my radar, and if it wasn't for Geordie Slasher Gamer recommending it, I'd have no clue about it. I saw it on his pickups, he described it was like an old school survival horror. I thought that's right up my street, picked it up and boy he wasn't wrong. This game is brilliant. It's basically an old school survival horror that's a love letter to games like Resident Evil and Silent Hill and other survival horror games of the mid to late 90s. You play a girl called Caroline Walker who journeys to a mansion turned hospital to search for two missing twins. While she's there, she gets knocked unconscious, wakes up naked in a bath on a ventilator, and as if that wasn't bad enough, when she looks in the mirror, somebody's nicked her right eye.
What a pisser.
This is what I would call a traditional old school survival horror game. There's limited ammo, lots of item management, and lots of puzzle solving. And some of these puzzles will really have you scratching your head. Graphically it's nothing fantastically special, but the game will have anyone like myself who was raised on the old original survival horror games of the mid to late 90s smiling from ear to ear. It's a 90s survival horror game with modern presentation. If you miss the old school survival horror games of yesteryear, then this game is right up your street. Coming in at number 9 we have Blood on the PC. Now this is a horror FPS game that was originally released back in 1997. You play Caleb and have to fight your way through an undead army of zombies, cultists, gargoyles and hellhounds as you seek revenge against the evil Chernobog. Graphically, Blood uses the build engine, which was the same graphics engine used to power Duke Nukem 3D, so the two games look very similar. Blood is fast paced, hugely over the top and bloody as hell. There's a variety of weapons you can pick up along the way, including a pitchfork, the obligatory double barrel shotgun and a flare gun, which for my money is one of the best weapons in any FPS. You can keep your BFG. There's lots of horror film references and Easter eggs in the game too.
Here's Johnny.
This is definitely a horror game for horror fans. It was remastered in 2019 by the amazing Night Dive Studios. If you've not heard of Night Dive Studios, they've recently remastered Doom 64, Turok 1 and 2, and most recently Quake. So this is a studio that definitely knows what they're doing. It's available on Steam and it's absolutely dirt cheap. Do yourself a favour and pick up this absolute 90s gem.
I live again.
In at number 8 in my top 10 is Silent Hill 2. Now, what more can be said about this game? This is an absolute bona fide classic. You play James Sunderland, a guy who gets a letter off his deceased wife telling him to meet her in Silent Hill. When he gets there, he sees all sorts of unspeakable horrors and meets all sorts of unspeakably disturbed characters. The game is much more a psychological horror game compared to games like Resident Evil, as it explores themes of punishment, guilt and grief. It includes some of the most iconic enemies in gaming now, including Pyramid Head. The game's use of subtle sound effects and limited vision from your little light, compared with the crackle of your radio which acts as a radar for incoming enemies, all this creates a real sense of unease as you navigate your way around. This is an absolute classic of the genre that you absolutely have to play, but if you do yourself a favour. Don't pick up the PS3 version because it's crap. Instead, pick up the PS2 version. Coming in at number 7 we have Dead Space from 2008. Now this is a third-person survival horror game that sees you play a guy called Isaac Clarke, who is an engineer who embarks on a repair mission on the UGC Ishimura after it went missing following its last mission. Now when you play this game you can see that it is obvious that this game is hugely inspired by Event Horizon, which is one of my favourite horror films. If you haven't seen it, you have to see it, it's fantastic. The game is brilliantly tense with some great gory effects. Necromorphs burst out of nowhere and come charging towards you, and the only way you can kill them is to dismember them, which is a great gaming mechanic. You can't just stand there and pump round after round after round into them. At the time, Dead Space for me was an absolute game changer. It was a new, scary IP that wasn't Resident Evil, which at the time had started to become much more action focused. Dead Space includes lots of atmosphere, grotesquely brilliant graphics, tense and suspenseful sound and some great boss battles and set pieces. There's a remake on the way and I'm really looking forward to it. You can pick this up relatively cheap now, so do yourself a favour, pick it up, give it a play. You won't regret it. In at number 6 we have Until Dawn on the PS4. Now this is a third-person survival horror game and it is basically like playing a really good slasher film. The developers of this game had clearly done their homework on slasher films as all the tropes are there. It uses a mechanic called the butterfly effect, so the choices you make throughout the game govern what happens in the story and can govern things like if a certain character lives or dies. This gives the game tons of replay value as you make different choices to see what the outcome is or see which characters live or die. The graphics and character animation are fantastically detailed, and the constant sound of the whirling wind and the detail in things like the mist and the snow create a real sense of isolation and claustrophobia. This was the first game I bought that really showed the power of the PS4. It still totally holds up today with some very graphic and gory death set pieces. If you have a PS5, it gets a graphical upgrade so it looks even better. Coming in at number 5 we have Alien Isolation. Now, after the complete disaster that was Alien's Colonial Marines, I'd just about given up hope of the Alien franchise ever having another decent game, as up until then the best game was Aliens vs Predator on the PC, and that was in 1999. However, my faith was completely restored when I played Alien Isolation. This is a game that truly captures the spirit of the film. Set 15 years after the events of the first film, you play Amanda Ripley, daughter of Ellen Ripley, as she investigates what happened to her mum. Everything about this game, from the sound to the graphics to the level design, are all taken perfectly from Ridley Scott's 1979 classic. None more so than the alien itself, which is absolutely relentless in hunting you down. And when the alien does catch you, and it will, it's instant death. There's no quick time events to get out of it, no hammering of the A button to break free. You're dead in some of the most terrifying ways. There's no point in running because this Hulking xenomorph can easily outrun you as it is terrifyingly fast. Now coming in at number 4, it's a 2 for 1. We have Ghouls and Ghosts and Super Ghouls and Ghosts. Now these are two of my absolute all-time favourite games. These are two games that will be on my top 10 horror games list and my top 10 all-time favourite games list forever. I can guarantee that. I first saw Ghouls and Ghosts at my local swimming baths back in the day. The swimming bath isn't there anymore, the roof blew off, they found asbestos so they levelled it. Which is a shame because I've so many good memories of learning to swim there and then afterwards going up to the little cafe area and having 20p to play on the arcades. You play Arthur, who has to fight his way through numerous levels, through lots of horror inspired baddies to save Princess Guinevere. I first had this on the ZX Spectrum back in the day, which, although very basic, had some creepy moments I really must admit, and this was primarily down to the limitations of the ZX Spectrum. Then I played it on the Mega Drive, and while it wasn't the arcade version that I was used to, it was still visually amazing with some huge end of level bosses, and quite frankly, it's absolute platforming perfection. Then I picked it up on the SNES, which, while graphically superior to the Mega Drive, one of the main differences is that it didn't have the upwards and downwards fire. However, it did have the double jump to make up for it, but it also had some absolutely amazing music. This music was spectacularly grand, it was gothic, and it was very catchy. These are two games that are just as great today as they were when they were first released. If you've not played them, do yourself a favour and give them a try, but do be prepared to die a lot. Okay, now we've reached the top 3, and in at number 3 we have Splatterhouse 2. Now, what more can I say about this video game? This is one of my all-time favourite games. Like Ghouls and Ghosts and Super Ghouls and Ghosts, Splatterhouse is in my top 10. This game was the first game I reviewed on my channel, and I mentioned in it how I was completely sold on the game purely based on the box art and the screenshots on the back of it, and boy, this game certainly didn't disappoint. You play Rick, who must save his girlfriend and escape from the horrors of the Splatterhouse, and boy are there horrors in this game, and gory ones at that. The graphics are grotesquely detailed on both the background and the enemies, and it is absolutely evident that the developers love their horror movies, as there are references to horror films everywhere in this game. The sound effects are really creepy, from the scream and the screaming memes to the groans of the huge end of level bosses which die in spectacular splatty fashion. These are complemented by some fantastically moody and creepy music which really sets the tone of the game. It's even worth picking up the Splatterhouse remake, which for me was a big disappointment, but it includes all 3 original games, so it's worth it just for that. Just being pipped to the top spot, in at number 2 we have Resident Evil 2. Now this for me is the all-time greatest video game sequel. It is the Aliens, it is the Terminator 2, it is the Godfather Part 2, it is the Empire Strikes Back of video games. I remember at the time there was such hype for this game after the success of Resident Evil 1, and then the game got cancelled and started again, but we didn't need to worry, as when the game came out it certainly didn't disappoint. It was tense, it was atmospheric, it was gory. You had things like the A and the B games which were interconnected, so what you did in Leon's A game affected Claire's B game and vice versa, so you in effect got 4 games. There were just so many moments in this game that absolutely had you jumping out of your skin. There was being stalked by Mr. X, there was the liquor crashing through the window, there were the zombie arms reaching through the boarded up windows. This game had so many moments that just absolutely pushed it beyond anything that was in the first Resident Evil game. And then, as if the original wasn't good enough, we then got the remake, which managed to be better and scarier than the original, with its foreboding, dimly lit corridors, grotesquely detailed zombies, and then we had Mr. X, who relentlessly stalks you through the game like some sort of trenchcoat wearing Terminator.
Jesus, stay back!
The sound design was amazing. You could hear movement and things going on all around you. These were really subtle but really effective at creating a tense and claustrophobic atmosphere. The remake took everything that you thought you knew about the original and showed you that it was more than just a bog standard remake. Okay, that's 9 down. We've arrived at number 1. My number 1 horror game, which is also my all-time favourite game. And that game is Resident Evil. This is the one that started it all, the one that started the entire Resident Evil franchise back in 1996. You know the story. STARS members are sent in to rescue Bravo team who've suddenly disappeared. They end up seeking refuge in a mansion which is overrun with a whole host of nasty things. The first time I played this game I was absolutely blown away. I'd never seen or played anything like it before. It was so realistic and graphically detailed at the time. Things like the pre-rendered backgrounds and all the detail of the blood on the zombies' lab coats. At the time, I thought it looked absolutely amazing. And the use of the fixed cameras gave this feeling that you were just constantly being watched all the time. The feeling of tension and claustrophobia created by things like the sound of your footsteps echoing on the entrance floor or on the wooden floorboards, to the sound of the lone ticking clock in the dining room, or the sound of howling dogs in the background when you ventured outside. This was supported by an amazingly eerie soundtrack, so it's rather a shame that the effectiveness of these are almost ruined by some fantastically bad voice acting.
Oh, Barry!
That was too close. You were almost a Jill sandwich.
You're right. Barry, thanks for saving my life.
But I think this just adds to the B-movie feel of the game. And I'm sorry, but this is not the worst voice acting in any game. I mean, come on, have you played Blue Stinger?
I repeat, I need an Easter unit now. Elliot Ballard, do you hear me?
Barely. This is Elliot Ballard.
We request D7 equipped rescue unit now. The location is...
Wait, hold on. I'm on vacation. I'm totally unarmed. So,
So?
I need help too.
Oh, great. Tell me your location, Elliot.
All I can tell you is that I'm by a pier.
Okay, Elliot. First, find an ID card. I'm sure there are a number of corpses around. You should be able to find one of them with an ID card. Oh!
What happened? Corpses? Did you say there are a number of corpses around? Where?
That was close.
Thanks for helping me. My name is Elliot G. Ballard.
Where's Tim?
Well, who are you?
Dogs. I'm a captain of the SS Deanna. If you're Elliot, you must be with Tim.
Tim is...
Tim is what? Dead?
I don't know.
I don't know. I don't know? Is that Acer's answer? You know, Tim once told me he had a high-level Acer member as a friend. Where are you going? To the island?
I am still a rescuer. There are people there who need help.
What a joke. Obviously, you're going to need good help, like me. I can't let a wimp like you go alone.
Whatever.
The backstory is filled in by finding journal entries of now zombified Umbrella staff. The game even manages to use its load times to create tension, as the door openings and the going up the stairs POV shots were used to mask the load times. This also created a feeling of tension and anticipation, as you had no idea what awaited you on the other side of that door or at the end of those stairs. And to increase the tension, health was scarce, you had to effectively manage your inventory and items, and there was hardly any ammo. The first Resident Evil also had no auto aim, so there was that increased pressure of getting your shots on target. If you were playing the game with a group of mates and you missed a shot with the grenade launcher or the Magnum, you'd never hear the end of it. And then there was the remake with graphics at the time that were absolutely jaw-dropping and sound that made an already nerve-wracking game even more tense, with the inclusion of additional storylines like the disturbing Lisa Trevor story. They even rectified the terrible voice acting.
Barry.
That was a close one. A second late, you would have fit nicely into a sandwich.
Really? Thanks.
So as I said, for me, this is not only my #1 horror game, it's also my all-time favourite game. So that just about brings us to the end of my top 10 horror video games. I hope you've enjoyed it. Please do let me know in the comments below your favourite horror video games, and as always, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you again.